Hello, hello! Welcome back to Brenda's Books. This season I will be narrating for you the future war love story, Sara's War, which you can also buy a printed copy and a digital copy at Barnes & Noble and on Amazon. Today we are on Chapter 31. Here we go. Chapter 31. Just Do It. I follow the bright beam of my flashlight as I curve in and out of the large oaks. The sky is completely black, with no sign of moonlight. The noise of the crowded campfire slowly dissipates, allowing me to hear more subtle sounds, like the crunching of the dry grass beneath my feet, and the loud singing of crickets, and the gentle breeze rustling the leaves. My insides jump every time my foot cracks a twig, as my imagination runs wild with unseen strangers lurking by. I approach a break in the cluster of trees and come to a small open meadow. Immediately I feel safer. However, in the same moment I feel exposed, like everyone in the world can see me. Little white wildflowers decorate the thick, tall weeds. I tread through them as they bend and scratch against the knees of my uniform. A large tent comes into view at the opposite end of the meadow. It's tucked in close to another cluster of oaks. A few smaller tents are scattered around the field, but none are very close to the largest one. Even from a distance, I can see that it's lit up inside. My heart beats faster with every step I take. What am I supposed to say to Jack? I think back on what a messy day it's been. Jack knew that if I had disobeyed orders, and it was me who got shot, then nearly 150 soldiers and officers would be without a doctor. How did I not see this? I can't believe I questioned Jack's orders, when it was clear that obeying them had kept me safe. Even with the surprise of the extra 2 men, Jack's plan had worked. I should have trusted him. I groan as I remember telling Jack of that very trust this morning. Everything I said to him tonight contradicted it. Would I have been so angry if that order to stay in the bus had come from someone else? I'm pretty sure I would have. But I would have kept my mouth shut about it. Then I wouldn't have looked like such a fool. It isn't healthy to think of the lieutenant colonel as anything but the lieutenant colonel. What I want with Jack can't exist in a professional relationship. Everybody knows that the army doesn't function without order. I can't screw it up. I won't screw it up. People need a doctor, and that is all I am going to be. As I draw near the tent, I see Lexi is right. The thing is huge. It's tall enough that even Jack could stand up straight in it. The door is zipped shut, but because of its inner brightness, I can see 2 shadows standing and moving about inside. The taller shape I recognize as Jack. As I come closer still, I'm able to make out the shadow of a large lantern sitting on the floor in the center of the tent, its obvious source of light. I can hear the 2 shadows conversing. I stop in my tracks, not wanting to eavesdrop, but everything else is so silent it's hard not to overhear. How did we end up with these guys? How did the staff sergeant not see this? Says a rich voice, which definitely belongs to Captain Barnett. I don't know, but he's sure going to hear about it from me. I want guards all around tonight, says Jack. Yes, of course, says Captain Barnett. How are you holding up with the Daggered Rose situation? Do you really think this is about Tashurgi? I'm positive, says Jack. You need some personal guards, says the captain. I do not, Jack counters. The victims of our soldiers' crimes need guards. Yes, but I definitely should not be listening to this. I clear my throat loudly and stride toward the tent door. Just a moment later, the door unzips from the inside, and the captain pokes his head out. I keep my flashlight low to the ground so I don't blind him. Hello, Captain, I say. Hello, he replies pleasantly. Then the entire tent door unzips quickly, with Jack standing beside Chris. Jack looks surprised to see me, but not at all displeased. Hi, he welcomes me. Hi, I don't want to interrupt, but I thought I would let you know I was here. I'll just take a little walk until you're finished. Oh no, we're through, says Jack quickly. Captain Barnett, this is Dr. Andrews. Have you two met? Not officially, says the captain, stepping over the threshold of the tent. How are you? He asks, holding out a hand. I reach out my own and we clasp hands together. His hand feels rough and strong. I'm well, Captain, I say warmly. It's nice to meet you, officially. The captain grins. It's nice to have another lovely lady on board. Jack looks at him quizzically, but immediately clears it away with a smile. Thank you, I say, letting go of his hand. Well, I assume you came here to speak with the colonel, so I'll let you two be. He turns to Jack and holds out his hand again. Thank you, sir, he says. The two men grip hands, giving one firm jerk before releasing. Thanks, Chris, says Jack. The captain raises his eyebrows in surprise, giving me a fleeting look. She already knows we're friends, Jack says to him. The captain glances between Jack and me, still looking confused. Jack grins. This is Sara, he says, nodding in my direction. Oh! Chris exclaims. Then he turns to me. I was confused because there aren't very many people Jack is casual with. But it all makes sense now. I told you she was the doctor, Jack reminds him. Chris smiles wide. Well, you didn't talk much about that, he says. A blush threatens my cheeks. But Jack, perfectly at ease, turns to me and says very matter-of-factly, he's never been a very good listener. Chris laughs and punches Jack in the shoulder. Oh, sure. I have never listened more in my life. Jack just looks at me and grins. Well, well, Chris chuckles as he pulls a small flashlight off his belt and clicks it on. Good night, you two, he says. With a friendly wave, he walks out into the darkness. Jack and I both watch him in silence for a moment. Then Jack grabs both my hands, a refreshing smile on his face. I'm glad you came, he says. Come inside with me. He releases one of my hands and then pulls me along with the other toward the tent. He holds open the flap of the door for me, allowing me to enter first. He follows quickly behind and zips the double zipper up all the way. The large lantern is so bright that I have to squint until my eyes adjust. I'm guessing this tent could hold 10 men if need be. At the far end, straight ahead, is a worn foam pad with a large black sleeping bag as a covering. To my left is another bed, almost identical to the first. Deep in the corner lay 2 large green duffel bags, stuffed to the rim, and 2 pairs of army boots flopped to the side. Next to them lay 2 large rifles, and something that looks like a briefcase, with heavy locks on 3 sides. More guns, maybe? I'm surprised to see a pile of books also, thick books that look very well read. They reminded me of my impossible textbooks in grad school. The center space is mostly clear beside the lantern and 2 oversized lawn chairs. This is a nice place you have here. Thanks. Jack smiles. But the rent is killing me with all the extra luxuries. I grin back. Who's the roommate? I ask, gesturing toward the second bed. Chris, he replies, motioning his head to outside. Ah, yes. He does seem like a good best friend. Jack nods once. I trust him to the core. I smile at that. Then I put my hands on my hips and cock my head. So, when did you find time today to have that long chat he referred to? Jack grins unashamed. That was this morning, before we left Big Rock. I hope you don't mind, he adds. I shrug. I don't mind. Jack takes off his camouflage jacket and hangs it over the back of the lawn chair closest to him. Hey, how is your nurse doing? He inquires. Who, Randy? Jack nods, looking up at me. Is that his first name? Yes. I suppose he will make it, I assume, still feeling a little worried about him. He did the hardest thing of all today, Jack says, as he lightens his belt from a couple of guns, leaving just 1 pistol by his right side. I wanted to recognize him at dinner tonight, but he crouches to set his guns on the floor. But something came up. Well, he wasn't at dinner anyway, I mollify. Jack nods again as he stands up. He casually takes a few steps in my direction until he's right in front of me, wrapping his arms around my waist. And I was going to come talk to you after I finished with Barnett, So, I'm glad you're here, he says with a smile, and then pulls me gently into a tight hug. My heart accelerates. Then I remember what I came here to do. He sure isn't going to make this easy for me. I try not to give in to the hug, but it's futile with him being close to me like this. So I wrap my arms around him, too. Sara, I want you to know that... Can I say something before I lose my nerve? I interrupt. Jack pauses. Okay, he says, unsure. I pull out of the hug to look at him. His expression is full of curiosity and a little concern. I put my hands to my sides to diminish any temptation. First of all, I need to apologize. Jack's lips curl up a bit as he takes a step back and folds his arms. It's not necessary. I already know you're sorry. But it is. I am so sorry, I exclaim. Jack gives me another small smile, looking sympathetic. I'm so ashamed of what I said to you. I was way out of line. Sara, Jack starts to say. I hold up a hand and he stops. I should never have questioned you, and I never should have told you that you were wrong, especially since you weren't wrong. Sara, No, it's not okay, I cut in again. You have impeccable judgment, and I should have trusted that. I do trust that. It's just, I didn't know the whole story, and I should have realized that you did. Jack purses his lips and seems to be holding his breath. His eyes have such a mixture of emotion in them. He looks amused, but also a little uncomfortable. I didn't know that the sergeant got shot because he disobeyed orders, I continue, and that could have been me, and here I was blaming everything on you, and I am so sorry. There, I think I got it all out. Jack's entire face softens as he puts his hands on my shoulders and looks directly into my eyes. You obeyed the orders, and that's what really matters. You don't need to apologize anymore, okay? I nod, feeling very nervous that he's in close proximity to me again. He's still gazing right at me as he attempts to hold back a smile. Did you know that I've never had anyone apologize to me before? Well, at least not an apology that I thought was sincere. Only ones out of obligation, or ones that I demanded, he admits. I raise my eyebrows in surprise. Jack runs his fingers down my arms and takes both my hands. I understand where you were coming from, you know. It had to have been insanely frustrating to watch a man nearly bleed to death and not be able to do anything about it, especially since that's your job. I nod. It was, I confess. Jack nods too. I understand. But I still shouldn't have told you about it. Jack shakes his head. That was my fault. I practically dragged it out of you. And besides, I don't mind if you tell me what you think. I could have guessed otherwise, I counter. Jack smiles a little sheepish. I'm not used to people disagreeing with me, he admits. I laugh once. I wonder what that's like. Nobody disagrees with you either, he points out. With medical things, sure, I concur. That's because you're the expert, Jack says with a smile. And you're the expert on, I wave a hand in the air, everything army. So, I'm sorry I disagreed with you. Jack rolls his eyes. I thought I told you to stop apologizing. I give him a tight salute. Yes, sir, I say dramatically. Jack cocks his head and gives me a disapproving look. I smile and clear my throat. Maybe this is a good time to move on to my next item of business. But before I know it, Jack wraps his arms around me again, coaxing my head into his vast chest. He rubs my back a little firmly, like he's getting out nervous energy. It sure feels nice. I'm glad we got that out of the way, he says softly. My heart begins to race again, but I just can't give in this time. Jack, I don't think we should do this, I tell him. Jack's rubbing stops. Do what? He asks carefully. This, I say, pulling out of his embrace. It's not going to work. The colonel and doctor thing. That dynamic, it will be too hard to get past. Jack looks shocked and hurt and confused all at once. My heart sinks. Don't give in, I chant to myself. What? He swallows hard. What do you mean exactly? I can't take orders from you all day and then snuggle up to you at night. It's like living a double life. I can't do that. I probably won't mess up the professional relationship again, but I probably will mess up the personal one because I won't know how to disconnect the two. I don't know if this makes any sense to him, but it's the best I can do. Jack sighs and drops his arms, glancing at the glowing lantern and then back up at me again. Why did you come here tonight? Because you were worried about our professional relationship or our personal one? Both, I suppose. Jack is back with his passive mask on, but the worry in his eyes is still evident. Sara, you're too principled to not work out a professional problem, and you're too sensitive to not care to fix a personal one. I think you'll be fine. What's the real reason you're saying this? I try not to cringe. Why does he always think so clearly? It's so maddening. I've already told you the reason, I affirm. Jack sighs again, a bit exasperated. He rubs the back of his neck, growing more anxious by the moment. I am too. My body is stiff and rigid. I feel like a statue that can't move. If you had feelings for me, you wouldn't be doing this, he says, still rubbing his neck and looking at the lantern. You must not feel the same way I do. He drops his hand and meets my gaze again. He looks so sad and disappointed. I almost want to take it all back. But I can't. It's better to stop things now, before it gets too messy and too hard. I swallow the lump in my throat, but it just ends up as a rock in my stomach. Now I'm having a hard time breathing normally. I shake my head slowly as if to refute his claim that I don't care about him. I want to tell him that I do feel the same way, but I know better than to say anything. So I clench my jaw, unable to take my eyes off him. With sudden urgency, Jack puts both his hands on either side of my face and whispers fiercely, "Why are you ending this now, before we've even started? We've barely had any time together to figure it out. I admit it will be tricky, but why don't we try and see how it goes?" His soft brown eyes are looking directly into mine, pleading. I try to pull myself together. Because it won't go, Jack. And to be honest, I don't know of any relationship in the army that has worked out. Jack freezes. Then his countenance slowly changes into what looks like hurt and shame from a source unknown to me. He drops his hands and looks toward the doorway again, his mouth hard. "Fine then," he says, his tone stiff. He turns to look at me again. "It's your choice." I nod. "I hope you understand." "I get it," Jack says before I finish. I swallow hard. "Okay, well, good night then," I say. Jack nods one hard nod. "Good night," he says in a tight voice. Then he snatches his radio from his belt. "Stein, where are you?" he asks. 20 yards from you, sir. Come to my tent and escort Dr. Andrews back to hers," Jack says. "Yes, sir, I'm on my way," says the voice in the radio. "That really isn't necessary." "You don't get to disagree with me anymore." Jack cuts me off in a firm voice. I stare at him in silence. He glares back at me, but I can still see hurt in his eyes. I breathe in deeply. "Yes, sir," I say softly. Jack shifts uncomfortably and looks away. Desperately wanting to escape this dreadful awkwardness, I click on my flashlight and make my way out of the bright tent and into the darkness. I see a figure walking toward me. "Are you ready, Dr. Andrews?" he asks. "Yes," I tell him. He continues to walk to me until we are side by side. Then he turns as we both start walking through the weeds together. "Goodbye, Jack. I'll miss you." And that concludes Chapter 31. Thank you so much for listening to Sara's War. It means so much to me. I hope you come back next Thursday for Chapter 32, which is called The Real Reason. I hope you're enjoying the spring weather. It's finally spring here where I am. If you want to find out more about Brenda's books, you can visit brendasbooks.net. Until next time, take care.